Okay, folks, I managed to get a comment in on Ethan Van Sciver's live stream today, and the comment had to do with the fact that I just released my 12th video on critiquing Isom #1, Eric July's first offering from the Rippaverse. And basically, I told him that, all I'm trying to basically say is, look, I'm not crazy. There is a problem with this thing that I had told you about before that there is a problem with. It was something that he pushed back on with, standard ridicule. Ethan's comments, and I'll put the link to the segment in the video description, but I think he'll say this is a fair paraphrase of what he had to say, was the thing about Isom #1 that you should understand is that it's written by a first-time comic book writer. Eric July, first-time comic book writer. You can tear it to pieces if you want to, but I would rather see people do constructive criticism, which I think yours mostly is, but be careful not to discourage people. I don't want to see Eric July stop writing and hand the writing off to others. And to be clear, I don't want to see that either. I want to make sure that it's understood that nothing that I'm saying in my videos, in any of my videos, is saying anything to the effect of, you need to get a new artist, you need to get a new writer, you need to get a new letterer, you need to get a new colorer. I think everybody on the book is doing an able job. And to the extent that I have not communicated that much as a basis, that's my fault. That's something that I should have been clearer about. Just as I made a video talking about the things that I like about Isom #1 after I had my conversation with Eric July, because I realized that after that 45-minute to an hour conversation, I never really did tell him what it was that I liked about the book. And I think the reason that I get into that kind of frame of mind is that when I'm on the spot and I'm trying to give somebody feedback that can help, the feedback that I think can help the most is negative feedback. Because if I tell you what you're doing right, that's the stuff that I figure you're going to continue on doing anyway because nobody complained about it. It'd be different if somebody was complaining about something that you did and I said, no, I really like what you did there. I think that was good. That would be a great instance for doing positive feedback. But for the most part, I think the feedback that Eric's been getting has been positive. Now, whether it's been as positive as it actually should be, or whether people ought to be, kind of restraining their butt kissing a little, that is, your mileage may vary on that. But I'm just basically saying that if I can tell you what I think you're doing wrong, and you can take that into account and say, okay, well, let me take that under consideration and then, see what I can do with it. The problem I have with Eric is that I have yet to see him, with the exception of one error that was spotted in his comic that was just a flat-out error, where somebody accidentally inserted the letter A into one of the lettering balloons accidentally. Total accident, could have happened to anybody, no big deal. With the exception of that, I don't know if he's ever said anything that he thinks he did wrong in the book, or that any of his contractors thinks they did wrong in the book. And every time that I basically said, this could have been done better, what I get is a pushback saying, well, if you didn't understand the information that I was trying to communicate to you, then that's your problem. There used to be a joke about an ID10T error. The problem was not the problem was not with the code. It was with the person, at the other end of the keyboard. And that is the kind of reaction that I've seen Eric give to absolutely every kind of criticism that I've seen him get. It's always a matter of, well, if this wasn't clear to you, then that's a reader problem. That's a reader comprehension problem. That can't possibly be something that I need to clean up, or that my artist needs to do better, or that my colorer might have either done better or warned me about, that my letterer could have done better or warned me about. Every single thing, down to the point of where I started to think he was gaslighting me on some of the things that I was bringing up, because he'd just completely say, no, I meant to do it that way, that's the way I wanted it done. And what do you do in a case like that? I mean, all I can do is just basically say, hey, here's what I think went wrong. And maybe other people he trusts are going to see my video and say, this guy's got a point. Maybe next time we should do something a little bit different here, or a little bit different here. and maybe we should draw this a different way, or maybe we should, kind of consider what these characters are doing in the scene, or where these things are positioned, and make sure that we've got a good idea of where people are in relationship to each other and how we communicate that relationship, etc., etc., etc. All those kinds of things. The best I can do is put that information out there so that maybe through some roundabout way, because the direct approach sure as hell doesn't seem to work, there's going to be some kind of receptivity to it, to the point of saying, oh, okay, yeah, I get it now. Because, in Ethan Van Sciver's case himself, very, very receptive to criticism on, things both large and small. There was a couple of points in which a couple of things that I contributed to, in my opinions, contributed to Wreck Planet, he implemented. Like right away. I mean, there was one where basically I said, this lettering balloon, it's making people think that their eyes should be going that way when really it needs to be going that way. If the lettering balloon was a little bit lower on the page, then people would be, allowing their eyes to go in the correct direction. And he, just turned around and did it in a second. Problem solved. And there was another page of input where I helped out. So those are the kinds of things, I'm not trying to say, well, obviously this is wrong, you need to just completely scrap this. No, this is here's where this could go better. And every single thing that I've been trying to communicate has been, here's where this could go better. Now, there are places where I have, just plain differences of opinion about where the book should have gone. I mean, when there's that famous break in the book where the ad takes place, and people complained about that. That's not something I ever had a problem with. But then the direction of the book went off, in a way that I would thought was not natural for the book. But that's just my opinion. I'm not going to tell him that he should have written it a different way, because he's got his own agenda when he's telling the story. Those aren't the kinds of problems that I think are actually problems. Those are just differences of opinion. It's just a difference of opinion if I think, well, you could have written the storyline so that these characters interacted more rather than those characters. That's just me trying to write a different book than he wrote. I mean, I wouldn't even try to give him that kind of advice. But the kinds of things that I wanted to say is here is the story that it's clear you were trying to tell. Here are the roadblocks that were in the way of the story that you were trying to tell. And if you remove those roadblocks, you will tell the same story, but you will tell it in such a way that it is so much clearer and easier for the reader that the reader would have no complaints. And the reader would just be able to sit there, turn the page, and never stop to say, wait a minute, what is going on here? Because I don't understand. And those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to communicate. And if all he's going to do is push back and say, well, every single time you didn't understand, that's on you, there's no room for improvement there. How can he improve? That's the kind of stuff that is how I would push back on that comment. But otherwise, obviously I don't want to discourage him from continuing. My hope is that the Rippaverse will be a success, at least to the level of Valiant Comics, and then beyond that. Because if he can get a monthly 96-page or more book coming out, whichever issues they happen to be of whatever series. I mean, you could have Isom one month, you could have Norfolka the next month, you could have Yaira the next month, you could have Alpha Core the next month, and alternate around through those, or whichever way they need to be. One book a month would at least put him at the level of what Valiant Comics did back when they started up, and they were publishing 4 titles initially. 4 monthly titles, that's like a 96-page book. So I would love to see the Rippaverse be at that level of success, but I want it to be the best kind of success it can be, because I don't think the marketplace is going to settle for anything less. If it comes across as confusing, if it comes across as something that makes the readers feel like this is kind of hard to read, I'm seeing too many things in here that make it a difficult read, then it's going to turn off readers, and I don't think we have too many chances at this. The Rippaverse has been the best chance I've seen yet at something that can compete on the campaign style comics, it's the best opportunity to set up an independent rival to the big two that I have ever seen. Because, I was on Ethan's show one time when he was showing me the things that he had changed for Wrecked Planet, and I was talking to some of the other creators who were on there, and they were basically saying that, it's not easy to get creators to get along. And Eric, by being a sole proprietor of his corporation, of his business, the Rippaverse, and being the sole owner of the company and the products and all that, he has got the final say. He has got the final editorial control, and he can ride herd, and he's offering good enough money to all of the creators that he can ride herd on them, make sure that they're putting forward a consistent vision, when otherwise, if you're dealing with just a bunch of independent creators trying to do things coordinated under the Comicsgate banner, you might have chaos. He has the ability to impose some order. And that, to me, and the fact that he is looking forward, he's got that vision of a cohesive universe, that gives me hope. That gives me more hope than I've had in a long time for a comic book universe that I can potentially enjoy. But the first product that I got out of that was not up to my standards. And I've got to say that. I've got to let him know that. I've got to let him know that, number one, I purchased the book. I am a customer. And number two, I was not a satisfied customer. And the reasons that I was satisfied are not just because I have a difference of opinion over, what could go here versus here, or how the book could go, but because I've been reading these damn things for like 40 years now, and I can see problems. I can see where there are things, and it's not just in independent comics that I see these problems. If you look back at the last couple of comics reviews that I did one on Heroes in Crisis. That was DC Comics. I did one on Age of Ultron. That was Marvel Comics. There's places where I can spot these things, and I'm like, this was not written in such a way that makes it easy to follow. This was not drawn in such a way that makes it clear to the reader what's going on or what should be going on. And so those are the things that I can contribute. Those are the things that I can tell. I can say, basically, look, now that I understand the message that you were trying to put forward in the book, now that I understand the story that you were trying to put forward in the book, I can tell you how to tell it more cleanly. But the only way that I can do that, the only way that I can impart that kind of information, is if you stop writing off people who are critical as haters, and start listening to them and at least saying, okay, I hear your point of view, I will take it under consideration. I can't guarantee that I'm going to make the kind of changes that you're looking for, but at least know that I've absorbed the information and I am not passing judgment on it. I'm just going to take it as is, and we'll go from there. That's all I can ask for, because there's cases where I could be wrong, and I could be telling you do this when do that is the better course. But I'm trying to explain from my perspective as somebody who went through the book and said, okay, why is that happening? Why is this page blank as far as dialogue goes? Who are these characters? Things that I've brought up are things that made me stop. And every time I stop, that's a sign that something wasn't communicated that should have been communicated. Something was rough. There was a rough patch, and there were a lot of rough patches. And if Isom number 2 comes out, and half of the content, it's 112 pages, if 56 of those pages go by and there's smooth content, I think that'll be an improvement over Isom number 1. An improvement is what I would want to see. Doesn't have to be perfect, just like Ethan said. It's not going to be a perfect book. Isom number 2, probably not going to be a perfect book. Isom number 3, not going to be a perfect book, but as long as it gets more perfect each and every time, each and every iteration, where you bring those mistakes and the knowledge of those mistakes into play and make sure you don't make the same mistakes again, then things can improve to the point where I feel confident enough where I can just basically sit back, relax, and enjoy a good comic. And that's the goal. That's the goal to everyone out there who's looking for a good comic to read is you just want to go through and see a good comic, and not put it on the side saying, man, I found a lot of like weird things in that. No, you just want to have the idea of, oh wow, that story, those characters, that those thoughts, that's what you want once you're done with the comic. So that is the goal. That to see the Rippaverse improve is the goal. It is not to try and throw the whole thing out, the baby out with the bathwater. That's the absolute last thing I want, because I don't read DC anymore. I don't read Marvel anymore. I'm not their defenders. The only thing that I read out of them these days is stuff that they've done in the past. I get reprint volumes, epic collections, trade paperbacks. That's it. That's all I get from them now. I am not a customer of theirs, but I am a customer of the Rippaverse for now, at least, and maybe on into the future, if things steadily progress and steadily get better. But, if things were to stay at the same level that they are now, I would probably be done in about 3 or 4 more issues. Because number one, I will continue on buying through the end of Ill-Advised. I will buy through the next story arc. Any new comics that come out of Rippaverse, their first arcs, I will most likely buy, unless, I just determine that the quality is just too bad up front. But hopefully, according to everything that I hear about the kind of quality professionals that he's trying to bring in, that will not happen. So I'm trying to be optimistic about it. And to the extent that I have not been encouraging in my tone, that's my fault. But I would hope the encouragement would come from the fact of, well, just from me trying to state it outright and say, keep going, keep pressing forward, but listen. Don't just dismiss everything as an ID10T error, because it's not always the reader's fault that the reader doesn't understand. If you look back at my latest video talking about the stairs, which is something that I've taken a lot of crap for, if you look at that and see what it is I'm trying to say, maybe you'll have an idea of where it is your reader's perspective is from this. Because, as I've said before, if you know the story, and this is something that Isom Van Sciver again can relate to, because he got 13 pages of notes, was it, from Bill Willingham on Cyberfrog to Wrecked Planet. You should really, by the way, Ethan, you should see if Bill Willingham would be willing to no pun intended, have you release that as a booklet or something accompanying Cyberfrog, like the first draft of Cyberfrog or something like that. I know there's a lot of people who would really be interested to see what the input of a creator like Bill Willingham on Cyberfrog was. What suggestions did he make as far as the writing goes? But I remember specifically, because I think you said this, there was a scene in Cyberfrog 2 Wrecked Planet where Cyberfrog is fighting one of the Vispas. Lily, who is Heather's child, is nearby, and at one point during the fight, Lily just opens her mouth and screams. Now, the reason she screams is that she's so scared, and, it just builds up and builds up and builds up in her. But I think, if I remember correctly, Bill Willingham said, the reader doesn't know what's going on in Lily's head unless you tell the reader what's going on in Lily's head. And so you need to have some sort of dialogue that's in the book, some sort of narrative caption that lets the reader know what Lily is feeling at that time, because the reader is not going to be able to just discern that. She just seems to scream for no reason at some point. And so, if I remember correctly, when I saw the finished page of Cyberfrog Wrecked Planet, there is a little narrative caption there saying, and now the fear that's bubbled up within Lily, can't be restrained, and then she screams. That's the kind of thing that I want to try to impart to Eric July, the thing where you as the writer, you as the artist, or color or letterer, whoever it is who's trying to impart the story to the reader, you already know the story. And you've got to make sure that the information that you're conveying through your communication is all there. Because sometimes it's not. You know, occasionally a writer is going to be blinded by his own knowledge to the fact that what he's trying to tell the reader is something that, you know, it's like, okay, I think by the time the reader sees all this, the reader will know. But sometimes the reader won't know. And it takes that outside view. I don't know if this is something I could do myself. I don't know that if I were in the position that Eric July were in, and I were trying to read my own comic from the perspective of the reader, that I could successfully determine at what points the reader needs to know thus and so, because I would already know those things in my head, being the writer. And that's why it's so important for the writer, for the artist, for the people who are creating the book to take commentary from the people who have read the book and say, okay, this is the outside perspective that I can't have, being privy to all the information that's already here. I'm already in the know. And so I need to be able to look at this from this person's perspective. And yeah, I was going to give an example of that from a movie. There's a movie out there. It's a sci-fi movie. It's a very famous sci-fi movie, and there's a twist in the middle of the movie. But I never knew that there was a twist in the middle of the movie because I already knew what the twist was. And so when my friend who was watching the movie right along with me, she had never seen the movie or the movie that preceded it, because this movie was a sequel, when the twist came, she was like, "Stop the movie." And I was like, "What's wrong?" You know, stop the movie. She said, "Are you trying to tell me that this is now this and this is now this?" And I never knew that that was a secret, because I'd had that information all along. I never had that reaction myself that she had had, because I had that reaction all along. I mean, I'd had that knowledge all along. And so it wasn't surprising to me as it was to her. And so that's the kind of thing. You got to be able to think from the perspective of the person who doesn't know what you know. And that's a very, very hard thing to do. So when people who are experienced with reading comics are commenting on these things and saying, okay, at this point, here is what I didn't know. Here is what confused me. Here is what could have been communicated clearer. Because it's not like after, when you've been reading comics for 40 years, it's not like you haven't been thrown a lot of curveballs that you've had to interpret. But if you still have difficulty after that, then maybe something is wrong in what you did, not what the reader interpreted. Maybe something you did could have been better. And that's where you find the room for improvement. And once you find the room for improvement and you incorporate that, you don't have to worry about that again, I hope. I don't know. I've only done a couple of comics myself, and they didn't go very far. So, anyway, my main point in making this is that I know that through my assessment of Isom #1 itself and my final judgments upon it, those may have come across as very discouraging, but I by no means meant to say quit. I absolutely do not want to see Eric July quit, either as a writer or in just producing the comics altogether. What I want is for the comics to get better, and my hope is that over time they will. So please take that to heart as the positive message of encouragement that I intend it to be. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you later. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Gotta always mention that. All right, thanks everyone, and I will talk to you later.